Drew Peterson has gone from a person of interest to clearly being a suspect.
Drew Peterson, cocky, arrogant,
Please go home. Please leave me alone.
a convicted killer.
12 people did the right thing, oh thank God.
There is a woman who testified at the trial of the man who murdered her. She named him. She described what he did. She told the court she had always known it would end this way. There is just one problem. By the time that trial began, she had already been dead for 8 years. Her name was Kathleen Savio. And the prosecutors had a phrase for what she did from beyond the grave. They said she was testifying from the grave. Here is what she left behind. A formal court document, signed in her own hand, saying she believed her husband wanted her dead, and that he would burn the house down just to shut her up. 18 separate calls to police, in just 2 years, from inside that home. And a warning she gave her own family, out loud, long before anything happened to her: if I die, it may look like an accident, but it will not be one. Then, one night in March, Kathleen Savio was found dead. Face down in a bathtub. A bathtub with no water in it. A deep wound on the back of her head. Her hair was wet. Her fingertips were wrinkled, the way skin gets after a long time underwater. But the tub around her was bone dry. And the official cause of death, signed and filed? Accidental drowning. She told them. She told the police. She told her family. She even put it in writing. And the man she named walked away clean, because the man she named wore the same badge as the people who investigated her death. 1 man. 4 wives. 3 divorces, 1 death, and a disappearance left in his wake. A decorated police sergeant who, by the time this is over, will be called a convicted killer twice over, and who will spend the rest of his life behind bars. This is the story of how he almost got away with all of it. And of the women who, even in silence, refused to let him. Before we get into this one, I want to hear from you. Tell me right now in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there as this is playing? Drop your city and your clock. I genuinely love seeing how far this community reaches. And while you're down there, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this with someone who loves true crime, and subscribe to Crime Docket USA so you never miss a case. It costs you nothing, and it helps this channel more than you know. Alright. Let's get into it. Kathleen Savio was born on June 13, 1963, in Chicago, the youngest of 4 kids in a working-class Italian family from the city's Little Italy neighborhood. Her parents split when she was just 2. Money was tight. Nothing came easy. Kathleen moved into her own apartment at 17, earned her GED, then put herself through community college. Everything she had, she built with her own 2 hands. Everyone called her Kitty. The people who knew her always mentioned the same thing first: the laugh. Loud, sudden, the kind that bubbles up out of nowhere and pulls everyone else in with it. You could hear it from across the house. She never tried to be the center of attention. It just kept happening anyway. She was sharp, especially with numbers. Accounting came naturally to her. But underneath the spark, the people closest to her described something softer, a real gentleness, and a fierce, protective love for her family. In 1992, when she was in her mid-20s, a friend set her up on a blind date. The man who showed up was older, in his late 30s, a police officer with a swagger that filled the room. On that very first date, he handed her a photograph of himself. In uniform. Her sister, Susan, would later say she never understood it. Who gives someone a picture of themselves on a first date? Kathleen just laughed it off. His name was Drew Peterson. He came on strong. That intense, sweep you off your feet kind of attention that feels flattering at first and suffocating later. The trips. The gifts. The promise of a house, and children, and a settled life. For a woman who had clawed for everything she owned, it was a lot to resist. Her family says she fell hard. He was supposed to be her prince. There was just one thing she didn't know at first. Drew Peterson was still married. He told her the divorce was nearly final, and that the woman he was leaving was a cocaine addict. None of that was the full truth. But by the time the pieces came together, Kathleen was already in love. They were engaged 6 months after that blind date, and married just months after his divorce came through. They built what looked, from the outside, like a real life. 2 sons, Thomas, born in 1993, and Christopher, born the following year. Kathleen handled the money, the books, the planning. She was the steady one, the one who kept it all running. On paper, she had made it. 2 kids, a house in the quiet suburb of Bolingbrook, enough stability to plan a future. But once the children arrived, the romance evaporated. Those close to the couple say Drew liked to have fun, and a house with 2 small boys and a wife keeping the books was not his idea of fun. He stopped coming home. And when he was home, the warmth was gone. He told people his wife was fat. That she looked like a dog. That she was ugly. He said it casually, the way you'd comment on the weather. Then it turned physical. On one occasion Kathleen ended up in the emergency room, a cut on her head, bruises across her body. She told her sister that Drew had beaten her, thrown her against a table. Hospital records line up with what she said. Peterson has always denied every word of it.
As a police officer, we don't have the same ability to do things as the common person. If I get involved in a domestic situation where I'm physical with a wife, I'll lose my job.
He said it almost like a defense. To others, it sounded like a man who knew exactly where the lines were, and exactly how to stand behind them. By 2001, Peterson's eyes had already wandered. And this time, the affair was happening almost literally under his wife's nose. While Kathleen and the boys slept upstairs, 47-year-old Drew Peterson was in the basement of his own home, with a 17-year-old girl named Stacy Callis. He met her while working the night shift as a sergeant, doing patrols, stopping in to check on the hotel where she worked nights. According to her own family, that is how it began. Him, coming by to check on her. Whatever he said to that teenager, it worked. By the accounts of the people around her, Stacy liked him. She believed his version of the marriage.
We were living separate lives in the same house just for economics.
Like everything else Drew told about Kathleen, it was a very one-sided story. Kathleen found out in October of 2001. An anonymous letter landed in her mailbox, telling her about the affair with Callis, and warning her that everyone at the police department already knew. The betrayal, her sister said, went beyond words. When Kathleen confronted Drew, it got physical again. She called her sister to say he had thrown her against the refrigerator. Drew denied it. He always denied it. He said they were just trying to start trouble for him. The marriage was finished. By the spring of 2002, Drew had moved in with Stacy Callis, into a house he bought just down the street from Kathleen's. And then came the cruelty that even neighbors noticed, the new couple rollerblading past Kathleen's house. Giving her the finger. Taunting the woman whose family he had just dismantled. The divorce was bitter, and it dragged. They fought over the children, over child support, and over Drew's police pension. the one thing he was determined she would never touch. Kathleen wasn't going to give in easily. She was tough. And she wasn't going to let him keep what was hers. And then there were the police calls. Over roughly 2 years, officers were summoned to Kathleen's home 18 times. Some of those calls had Kathleen on the attack, some had Drew. But one stands apart. July 5, 2002. Kathleen reported that Drew had broken into the house, ordered her to sit on the stairs, and held her there for hours, at knife point, threatening to kill her. And here is the rot at the center of this whole story. The officers who answered those calls worked for the Bolingbrook Police Department. The same department where Drew Peterson was a sergeant. Again and again, they would leave. Or they'd talk her down. Tell her it was just a spat. Nothing would happen. So Kathleen started putting it in writing. In the spring of 2002, she filed for an order of protection, describing years of threats and abuse, and stating, plainly, that she believed Drew wanted her dead and would burn the house down to silence her. That November, she wrote a letter directly to the assistant state's attorney, laying out the abuse and begging for someone to stop him. And according to multiple accounts, she didn't only write it. She went to the chief of police in her own town and told him to his face, "If anything happens to me, it's because Drew did it." People heard her. They wrote it down. It went into the files. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Nothing changed. The letter to the state's attorney, the result was nothing. Nothing at all. This is not a story about warning signs that got missed. The warnings were filed, formal, signed, and specific. The problem was that the system she was begging for help was the same system that gave her ex-husband his power. That is not bad luck. That is a conflict of interest, plain and simple. So who was the man she was so afraid of? Drew Walter Peterson was born on January 5, 1954, in Illinois, and grew up around the same Chicago suburbs where this entire story would later unfold. The people who knew him young describe a bright, dependable, hard-working kid. A coworker from his teenage job at a Burger King remembered him as sharp and reliable, the kind of young man who seemed destined to make something of himself. In his early 20s, Peterson joined the Army, serving in the military police. He was good enough to pull honor guard duty, close enough to the powerful that he was on hand at ceremonies attended by sitting presidents, including Gerald Ford. He left the Army and joined the Bolingbrook Police Department. Eventually he landed where he seemed built to be, undercover narcotics. It was, by one description, the perfect assignment for him, a job where he was trained to cover up, to lie convincingly, to present false information and make people believe it. A job where charm was a weapon. Then, in 1985, he went too far. Peterson was accused of misconduct, running an unauthorized, self-assigned investigation, and failing to report a bribe. He was charged. He lost his job and his place on that narcotics unit. But Drew Peterson did not have a tendency to give up. He fought it. And the following year, the firing was overturned, a ruling that there wasn't enough to make the charges stick. He got the badge back. He stayed on the force, moved up the ranks, and settled comfortably into an institution that, time and again, handed him the benefit of the doubt. Hold on to that pattern. The benefit of the doubt. Because it is about to cost a life. And there was the other pattern, the women. Those who knew him say Peterson seemed to need a female companion devoted to him at all times. His first wife was his high school sweetheart, Carol Hamilton. They married young, in the 1970s, and had 2 sons. That marriage fell apart after about 6 years, reportedly over his cheating. In 1982 he married again. His second wife, Vicki Connolly. Together they ran a bar. But she would later describe a marriage that was anything but happy, one she said was marked by abuse. There were darker claims, too. Vicki was in a serious car accident, and there were whispers, never proven, about whether Drew had tampered with the brakes. She also said that as the marriage was ending, she woke one night to find Drew standing over her bed in a way that frightened her. And, this detail matters, she claimed he once told her he knew how to kill her and make it look like an accident. Sit with that. Because he allegedly said it years before Kathleen Savio ever died in a dry bathtub. That second marriage ended in 1992, when Vicki discovered Peterson was having an affair with Kathleen Savio. Within months, he married Kathleen. And about a decade after that, while still married to her, he would find his 17-year-old in the basement. The pattern wasn't a coincidence. It was who he was. In October of 2003, the very same month his divorce from Kathleen was finalized, Peterson married Stacy. She was 19. He was 49. But Kathleen and Drew were not finished in court. The divorce was done, but the money was not. The division of all that shared property, including Drew's police pension, was still unresolved. There was a hearing coming to settle it. And Drew Peterson did not want his ex-wife getting a piece of that pension. Kathleen never made it to that court date. On the night of March 1, 2004, Peterson said he had been unable to reach Kathleen to drop the children off. He brought a locksmith, he said, and had neighbors go inside. And there, a neighbor found Kathleen Savio dead inside her own home. She was lying face down in the bathtub. Her hair was wet. Her fingertips were wrinkled, the way skin gets after a long time in water. But the bathtub itself was completely dry. There was a deep gash on the back of her head. She was 40 years old. A wet body. Wrinkled fingertips. A dry tub. Take a second, and ask yourself, does any of that add up? First responders noted the scene, a dry, clean tub, and no signs of forced entry. And because a Bolingbrook officer was tied to the dead woman, the case didn't stay entirely in-house. The Illinois State Police got involved, and early findings went to the Will County State's Attorney's Office as a possible homicide. But Peterson had what looked like a rock-solid alibi. He was home with his new wife, Stacy. They'd married just 5 months before Kathleen died. And then the case took a strange turn. Instead of a full homicide investigation, Kathleen's death was routed to what's called a coroner's jury, a panel of ordinary community members who hear testimony and decide how a person died. It's an old procedure, one that has largely fallen out of favor. As prosecutors would later put it, Drew was treated nothing like a civilian would have been. The lead investigator had never worked a homicide. A crime scene technician decided, almost immediately, that this was an accident, and collected no evidence, preserved nothing, and did next to no real work. And here is the detail that has followed this case for 20 years. According to court records and trial reporting, sitting on that coroner's jury was a police officer who personally knew Drew Peterson, and who vouched for him to the other jurors. Said he was a good man who would never hurt his ex-wife. The verdict came back, accidental drowning. Case closed. No real investigation. No charges. And Drew Peterson, who had a key to Kathleen's house, and who stood to benefit from her death, walked away clean. Kathleen's sons would ultimately receive a life insurance payout reported at around $1 million, with Peterson controlling the estate. Kathleen was laid to rest at a Catholic cemetery, with a funeral mass at her family's church, buried under an official record that called her death an accident. Her family never believed it. Not for a single day. Her sister was certain from the start that Kathleen had been murdered, and most likely by Drew. While Kathleen's family grieved, the woman now living in Drew Peterson's house was barely an adult herself. Stacy was only 20, with young children to care for. And she didn't wake up one day with some sudden revelation about her husband. Friends would spot his police cruiser parked near the grocery store while she shopped. He'd call constantly the moment she left the house. He didn't want her to work. When she tried to study for the nursing degree she was chasing, he reportedly wouldn't watch the kids so she could focus. Each piece, on its own, might sound minor. Together, they paint control. And still, Stacy poured herself into being a mother. She decorated her kids' rooms by hand. She made that house feel warm and safe. She helped raise Kathleen's 2 boys, Thomas and Christopher, treating them as her own. By every account from the people who loved her, she was loyal, devoted, and trying to build something good. Then, in 2006, Stacy's sister died, and something in Stacy began to come apart. Those around her say the grief was enormous, and that Drew gave her no room to feel it.
There wasn't any sensitivity to what she was going through. It's like he didn't even want her to cry or process the grief.
Her aunt, Candace, remembered the night after the sister's funeral.
Kept coming in there and wanting her to go, but she said no, she wasn't going with him, and she didn't want me to get out of the bed, and I was afraid.
The couple even went to marriage counseling, to their pastor, Reverend Neil Scory, who was also their minister. After about half a dozen sessions, the Petersons stopped coming.
Really had a confidence and arrogance maybe that nothing was going to be found out that would put him in a significantly bad light. There was unhealthiness and controlling and manipulation. The same issues really seemed to continue, so I can't say that anything seemed a whole lot better.
But Stacy was carrying a secret. And she finally told it to 2 people. The first was Reverend Scory. In 2007, Stacy met him at a coffee shop. He later testified that she was nervous, tearful, frightened. And she told him about a night 3 years earlier. The same night Kathleen Savio died. Stacy said she and Drew had gone to bed at the same time. She woke in the middle of the night, and he was gone. She searched the house. She called his phone. No answer. Then, in the early morning hours, she said she found him near the washing machine, dressed all in black, holding a bag. She watched him take off those clothes and put them, along with the contents of that bag, into the wash. The clothing in the bag, she said, was not hers. According to the pastor, Stacy said Drew told her he had killed Kathleen, and then coached her, for hours, on how to lie to police if they ever came asking. And she did lie. Because she was afraid. She told a version of the same story to a second person, Harry Smith, who had been Kathleen's divorce attorney. Stacy reached out to him, asking whether what she knew about Kathleen's death could be used in her own divorce from Drew. She told her pastor. She told a lawyer. She told friends she was scared, and that she wanted out. And then, before any of it could lead anywhere, Stacy Peterson disappeared. On October 28, 2007, she was supposed to help her sister Cassandra with a project. She never showed. Cassandra's brother texted that they couldn't find Stacy, and Cassandra later said she knew in her gut, instantly, that her sister was gone. Drew told police that Stacy had called him to say she was leaving him for another man, that she had driven herself off and vanished into a new life.
She loves male attention. She could be...
Ran off with a guy?
Ran off with a guy, and she could be dancing somewhere. I don't know.
Her car turned up in the parking lot of a small local airport, Clow International, only a few hundred yards from the house. Drew's story was that Stacy had left it there herself, and that he'd simply gone and brought it home. The people who actually knew Stacy didn't believe a word of it.
I was like, no, she doesn't want to disappear. No pattern in her life of that at all.
Her sister reported her missing the very next morning, the moment she realized Stacy hadn't reached out. That is the part that stays with you. She told her pastor. She told a lawyer. She told people why she was afraid. And she was gone before anyone could help. If you're still with me, drop a single word in the comments right now, Kitty, for Kathleen, or Stacy, for the wife who was never found. I want to see which name this case leaves you thinking about. And if Crime Docket USA is the kind of channel you want more of, the like and the subscribe genuinely move this work forward. Okay, back to it. Step back and look at the full picture, because this is the heart of it. 3 women. 3 separate warnings. All pointing at the same man. Vicky Connolly, wife number 2, had told people Drew once said he knew how to kill someone and make it look like an accident. Kathleen Savio, wife number 3, wrote her fear of exactly that into legal documents, told the police chief to his face, and ended up dead in a dry bathtub. And Stacy, wife number 4, told her pastor she watched her husband come home in black clothing the night Kathleen died, and told the people around her she was too afraid to leave. 3 women. 3 warnings. The same suburb. The same man. And not once, not after Vicky spoke up, not after Kathleen filed for protection, not even after Kathleen warned the chief, did anyone connect the dots. Each story was treated like an isolated problem, when in reality they were all describing one person. And that person had exactly the badge, the connections, and the benefit of the doubt he needed to tilt every situation in his favor. It took a missing 23-year-old to finally make the system look back. In November of 2007, the Illinois State Police went public. Drew Peterson was officially a suspect in Stacy's disappearance. That same stretch of weeks, a judge signed an order to exhume Kathleen Savio's body. The once-closed case was open again, because there were tests that should have been done the first time, and never were. And Peterson? He did not lay low. He seemed to feed on the spotlight. As searchers combed the area for Stacy and the whole country whispered about Kathleen, Drew Peterson opened his front door to reporters. He let them inside. One journalist who staked out the home described something eerie: Peterson's children sitting in the living room, watching the news coverage of their own missing mother, while Drew, a few feet away, was too busy working the phones with his lawyer and a publicity agent to pay them much attention. He talked to anyone who would listen. Asked what happened to his 3rd wife.
The 3rd wife.
Okay,
What happened?
don't know.
Asked what he'd say to his missing 4th wife.
What would you say to Stacy, your 4th wife?
Come home. I don't believe she's missing. I believe she's where she wants to be.
He and his attorney, Joel Brodsky, planned a full media blitz, getting, as they framed it, both sides of the story out.
Is this damage control?
I wouldn't call it damage control. It's getting both sides of the story out there.
But the plan curdled. In January of 2008, during a radio interview, Brodsky floated a contest idea: win a date with Drew. It landed exactly as badly as it sounds. Then Kathleen's body came back from the ground, and a far more thorough autopsy. The injuries did not match a simple fall. There were bruises and scrapes across her body, multiple separate bruises, far more than one slip could ever explain. The gash on the back of her head was too deep, too severe, for a stumble in the bathroom. The conclusion: Kathleen had drowned following a struggle, and then been placed in that tub. On February 21, 2008, the Will County State's Attorney, James Glasgow, made it official, changing the record from accident to homicide. He called it exactly what the family had been screaming for years: a homicide, staged to look like an accident. On May 7, 2009,
For the murder, Drew Peterson, now under arrest.
Peterson was arrested in a traffic stop near his Bolingbrook home at 5:30.
Drew Peterson was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Kathleen Savio. He was pulled over near his Bolingbrook home. His bond was set at $20 million.
Drew Peterson finally facing Lady Justice.
A sensational trial. A set of
The trial began in the summer of 2012, in Will County, before Judge Edward Bermela. Here was the prosecution's problem.
Because they had nothing except for, they were getting divorced and we don't have any other suspects, so he must have done it.
There was no physical evidence, There was no sign of forced entry, there was no fingerprints, no DNA. There was simply nothing to prove that it wasn't an accident.
Peterson's defense was a 6-lawyer dream team, experienced. They thought they had an open and shut case. But James Glasgow disagreed.
29 years of experience, there was no doubt in my mind it wasn't an accident. That was clear.
His opening was blunt. Peterson had carried out his constant threats to kill Kathleen, and staged it to look like a fall. Then Glasgow turned on the original investigation itself, the questioning of Drew in the break room of his own police department, the lead investigator who had never handled a homicide, the crime scene tech who called it an accident on day one and preserved nothing. But Glasgow still needed the women's voices. So he called his dead and missing witnesses, Kathleen and Stacy, brought into that courtroom through the statements they'd made while they were alive. Normally that's called hearsay, and it never sees a jury. But in 2008, Illinois lawmakers had passed a statute the press nicknamed Drew's Law.
In essence, what you're basically allowing the victim of a violent crime to do is to testify from the grave.
The idea, as one lawmaker put it, was to stop killers from walking free simply because their victims couldn't take the stand. First to the stand, Susan Doman, Kathleen's sister. She told the jury, through tears and steel, exactly what Kathleen had told her Drew said.
He told me he's going to kill me. He said he's going to make it look like an accident, and no one will ever know.
The room went silent. Jurors were riveted. Peterson sat stone-faced. Then came Reverend Neil Scory. He told the jury what Stacy had confided.
To lie about where he was, and to cover it up, and he actually said to her, this will be the perfect crime.
Worse for the defense, jurors learned Drew had been physically present when police interviewed Stacy, right on top of her, in effect coaching her answers in real time. There was also a former co-worker, Jeffrey Pachter, who testified that Peterson had once offered him money to find someone to kill Kathleen, and that after she died, Peterson told him the favor was no longer needed. And then, the strangest turn of the whole trial. It was the defense that called Harry Smith, Kathleen's old divorce attorney, hoping he'd paint Stacy as a woman who'd say anything for money in a divorce. Instead, Smith told the jury that Stacy had asked him whether the fact that Drew killed Kathleen could be used against him. The defense had handed the prosecution its case. The defense's final witness was Drew and Kathleen's own son, Thomas, who testified that he did not believe his father had killed his mother. Drew Peterson himself never took the stand. After 3 weeks and 44 witnesses, it went to 12 jurors, 7 men and 5 women.
A jury that's very thoughtful, and they're going to make sure they come to the right conclusion.
They deliberated for close to 14 hours, across 2 days. On September 6, 2012, they returned a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Outside the courthouse, Kathleen's family wept and held one another. We did it, we got him.
Finally, somebody heard Kathleen's cry. 12 people did the right thing, oh thank God.
I know that she got justice in the hands of that cold-blooded killer up there.
At sentencing, Kathleen's sister begged for the maximum, telling the court he had no remorse, that she had to live with what he did, and recover from it, every single day.
He killed my sister. I have to live with that.
And the silent defendant from the trial finally erupted, rising to shout that he did not kill Kathy. The sister's reply was steady, "You're a liar, you did kill her."
I wasn't going to take the devil. I wasn't going to let him say that. And my reply was, "You're a liar, you did kill her."
And that shrill, kind of feminine screech that he didn't kill Kathy, that's the guy that killed Kathy. You got a glimpse into his soul.
Judge Burmala sentenced Drew Peterson to 38 years in prison, no chance of release until he is in his 90s. Glasgow, who had carried the case for nearly 3 decades, summed it up on the courthouse steps.
He was a thug. He would threaten people because he had a gun and a badge. And nobody ever took him on. We took him on now, and he lost.
You would think that would be the end of it. It was not. Peterson appealed, arguing that even with 6 lawyers, his lead attorney, Joel Brodsky, had been ineffective counsel, pointing in particular to that catastrophic decision to call Harry Smith. The appeals went nowhere. The hearsay had been allowed. The conviction stood. And then Peterson did something almost impossible to believe. From inside prison, in late 2014, he approached a fellow inmate and tried to arrange the murder of James Glasgow, the prosecutor who had put him away. But the inmate went to authorities and agreed to wear a wire. Investigators caught Peterson on tape, laying out the plan in his own words, offering money to have Glasgow killed. His later excuse, that he was only pretending, did not move the jury. In 2016, he was convicted of solicitation of murder and murder for hire, and sentenced to an additional 40 years, stacked on top of the 38 he was already serving. Together, that is 78 years. For a man already in his 60s, the math was simple. Drew Peterson is going to die behind bars. But the story still isn't finished. Because Stacey Peterson has never been found. Her case remains open. Peterson is still considered a suspect, but he has never been charged in her disappearance. And her sister, Cassandra Callis, has never stopped, and never stopped believing. Ask her directly whether Drew Peterson killed Stacey, and the answer is immediate. 100%. For nearly 20 years she has devoted her life to the search. She has organized private dives, hired sonar crews, brought in specialists, including an underwater search expert who works a remote-operated vehicle, and spent her own money chasing what she believes are her sister's remains in the murky depths of Illinois canals and rivers. As recently as this year, she has been pushing for new searches, convinced Stacey is down there, refusing to let the world move on. And Drew Peterson? Now in his 70s, transferred out of Illinois and into federal custody in Indiana, he is still fighting from his cell, filing handwritten motions, blaming his trial lawyer, trying to get the conviction thrown out. He's claimed, from prison, that he's living the dream and maintains his innocence to anyone who'll listen. Every appeal so far has failed. The higher courts have turned him away. By the records, he won't even be eligible to ask for parole until the year 2081, long past any life he could live. Stacey's sister-in-law reached out to a Chicago-area domestic violence expert, and, together with Stacey's own pastor, they built a project to help abuse survivors document their stories, to put their fears and their evidence somewhere safe, witnessed and notarized, so that even if the worst happens, the record cannot be erased, and cannot be dismissed as hearsay. It was born straight out of what happened to Stacey, and to Kathleen Savio before her. A woman who spent years filing reports and keeping receipts that everyone ignored while she was still alive. Because in the end, this was never really about the sentence or the courtroom drama. It is about her. The woman her family called Kitty. The one with the wild, contagious laugh. The accountant who kept the books and adored her 2 sons. The girl from Chicago's Little Italy who built her whole life from scratch, surrounded by people who loved her. The same people who, decades later, stood outside a courthouse and were finally able to say out loud, she was telling the truth all along. And it is about Stacy, too, the 19-year-old who became a mother to another woman's sons, who decorated her children's rooms by hand, and who told a pastor and a lawyer what she knew before she disappeared into silence. A sister still searches the water for her. Faith, Candace once said, was her own middle name. She figured she was going to need a lot of it. She said it before she died. It just took the world far too long to listen. That is the Drew Peterson case. A man who hid behind a badge, and a system that kept handing him the benefit of the doubt, until one woman was dead, another had vanished, and 4 children were left without a mother. So now I want to hear from you. If you were on that coroner's jury back in 2004, looking at a wet body in a dry bathtub, would you have called it an accident? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single one. If this case stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Crime Docket USA with the notification bell on, so you never miss the next case. This has been Crime Docket USA. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you on the next docket.